You don't know flag.
Thank you, Sergeant Satchel. Thank you, Sergeant.
You don't know flag.
Welcome to You Don't Know Flag, a podcast full of stories about retro gaming, retro computing, video games, arcade games, and technology from a guy who was there and still is. My name is Rob O'Hara, but for the next 30 minutes, you can call me Flag.
Episode 117, Copyfests.
Hello and welcome to episode 117 of You Don't Know Flag. On today's show, we're going to be talking about Copyfests, the old copy parties we used to have back in the day where people swapped software and copied. Don't copy that floppy. That wasn't our rule. We copied every floppy. Before we begin, I'm going to go through a few orders of business. This podcast is actually different than most of the other ones I've done. Actually, there's one thing that makes it totally unique. For the first time ever, this podcast is being recorded on my iPad. I am not at home recording this podcast. I am sitting in a hotel room in Washington, D.C. The cable in this hotel room has about 40 channels. Most of them are standard def. So I have my choice of Seinfeld reruns or Family Guy reruns, or at least 20 channels are covering the current political race. None of that, well, I won't say none of that interests me. I'll always watch old Family Guy episodes, but I decided this would be a good time to test my new portable setup. So what I have right now is my Blue Yeti microphone running into my iPad using the camera adapter that they sell for the iPad, which actually allows you to plug USB devices into the iPad. I know that's one that Apple haters will always tell you can't be done plugging USB devices, but there are actually several USB devices with this small adapter that will work. And the Blue Yeti microphone is one of those. I'm also using Blue Fire 1.5, which is a free recording program for the iPad. The only hurdle I had to leap over, and this is something that I've talked about in the past, is that the Blue Yeti requires more power than the iPad is able to put out. So the Yeti is actually plugged into a powered USB hub, and the hub is plugged into the iPad. So, oh, and someone's at the door. Well, that was odd. That was a pizza delivery for the wrong room, and that's one of the unique things that can happen while recording a podcast in a hotel room. So I wasn't expecting that interruption this early. You may hear the air conditioner pop on and off. You may hear people slamming their doors, and I am located right outside of a very busy train track. So this episode's not going to be perfect from an audio standpoint, but I've got the time and I've got the story, so here we are. I've had a few emails, people asking me what's going on with robohara.com. Hasn't been updated very much lately, and the truth is there just hasn't been much to write about. I don't write about family and I don't write about work, and that really... those two things have been taking up the majority of my time lately, so I'm still writing at least 3 times a week, between 3 and 5 times a week at retroist.com. So if you enjoy my stories about retro things, movies, toys, things like that, you can always check out retroist.com. I also recently spent some time setting up a Telnet BBS, known as the gas chamber. You may have heard of it if you've listened to some of my podcasts. So if you have Telnet on your computer, you can go to a DOS prompt and type telnet space bbs.robohara.com, and you will be taken back in time to the gas chamber BBS. So there's about 10 or 15 users on there right now. There's more users on my forum, which is at thegaschamber.robohara.com. It's kind of confusing, I guess, and both those things are the gas chamber, but in different ways they both embody the old spirit of the gas chamber. But if you want to check either of those things out, that's bbs.robohara.com. That's the Telnet BBS. Or thegaschamber.robohara.com, which is the forum. That's pretty much all I have for old business. So, assuming no one else knocks on the door, tries to deliver pizza to the wrong door again, we will continue with this episode of You Don't Know Flack. I want you to close your eyes for a minute and imagine yourself downloading an MP3 file, for example. Not a gigantic one like this podcast, but maybe a single song, like 3 meg in size, something like that. While you're imagining that, I'm actually going to download one here. Let me click this. Now I'm going to take you back in time, back 30 years to 1982 with the release of the Commodore 64. Now, my first modem was a 300 baud modem, which transferred data at 300 bits per second. And a single side of a Commodore 64 disk holds right around 180K of information. And to download 180K at 300 baud, it took close to half an hour. So when you do the math, that 300 meg MP3 file that I mentioned would have taken about 23.5 hours to download. By the way, the one that I clicked on was already done downloading before I was done with the first sentence. Now, of course, there were no 3 meg games available back then, but there were lots of games that took up 1, 2, sometimes 3 or 4 sides of a disk. So, obviously, trading software at 300 baud was pretty frustrating. And not to mention there was no resume back then, not in the early days anyway. So if your file got cut off, that was just time wasted and you had to start over. Now, I only had 300 baud for a very short time before upgrading to 1200 baud. But 1200 baud is not exactly 4 times faster than 300 baud. You still had a certain amount of overhead. And so on the Commodore, it was closer to around 30 minutes for each side of a disk. So like I said, that's better speeds, but still not great. And obviously there were certain limitations to transferring files over modem. One of the biggest one was that copy-protected disks couldn't be sent across a modem. So there were only certain things that you could upload and transfer. So copying disks back then was obviously much faster. Now, it still wasn't a perfect system. Whenever you... what I would do, or what a lot of us did back then, was you would find people online, online being BBSs back then, not the internet, and you would set up a trade in person. Now, first of all, you have the logistics of just 2 people meeting. Obviously, one of those people is going to have to travel to the other person's house. So, if most BBSs, because of long-distance phone calls, most BBS users were local to one another. So it wasn't like you were going to have to travel to another state. But, it might be across the city. It could be half-hour drive, an hour drive, something like that. And back then, when I first started trading with people, I wasn't old enough to drive. So not only did you have to involve coordinating time with another person, but now you're going to have to get someone's parents to drive you across town, drop you off at a stranger's house, which seems more weird now than it did back then. Now, with the Commodore, because the Commodore had a limited amount of RAM, it's Commodore 64, so a lot of people say, or a lot of people believe that was 64K of RAM, but actually you had closer to 32K of RAM. A lot of that memory was ROM that was used up right off the bat. And because it had so little RAM to copy a disk, you couldn't hold the entire contents of a disk in RAM. So if you only had one disk drive, you would have to swap disks 6 or 7 times. So it would read a little bit from the original, then you would put in a blank. Then you would put the original back in, it would read a little bit more. Then you would put the blank back in, it would write a little bit more. So 6 or 7 times of doing that. And obviously if you messed up, if you left the blank in there twice, your copy was going to be ruined. Or if you left your original in and it overwrote it, your original could be ruined. And back when I started, floppy drives, in the early days, I think floppy drives retailed for around $300. So not everybody had 2 floppy drives. I got my second drive when they had dropped down to $200. Now, there were programs that would bypass the error checking process. FastHack'em had a 2-drive nibble, which would do a bit copy in about a minute. Or if you didn't want to do the write verify, then there was a 35-second copy. But if you were going to go to someone's house, now if you wanted to really be proficient, what you would do is take your computer system over to their house as well. And I did that many times. Now, we're talking about, now I'm dragging my Commodore, a disk drive, if they don't have one, a spare monitor. So it's several trips in and out of the car. You're breaking down the system, carrying it over. But the advantage that this gave you was you could copy their disks while they were looking through and copying your disks. So that made things go a lot faster, obviously. But like I said, this still wasn't a perfect system. One of the biggest drawbacks was you were still dealing with a single person. So if the person you were trading with, if they only had a few programs you wanted, then you might not be getting very much software. They might be getting more of yours. So it wasn't perfect, but it was obviously much faster than just trading across the modem. So I did that quite a bit. I drove, I had my parents drive me to a lot of people's houses. Some of them were adults, some of them were kids my age. And I did a lot of software trading one-on-one with people. Now, somewhere along the way, and I want to say I was probably 13 at the time. So this would have been 1984, 1985, somewhere in there. I found out about this local computer club called Univision. And I don't really remember how I heard of it. I think there was a local user group in my area, and someone at that group had told me about Univision. Of course, around the same time, my parents were running their computer store. So it could have been someone through the store. They ran a local software store for about a year. And so anyway, Univision was a local computer group. There was a lot of these back then where people would bring their computers and get together like one day a month or something, and you would show off like things you had programmed, or people might do demonstrations, and people would swap, buy and sell hardware. So a typical Univision meeting, I would say, probably had anywhere from 20 to 30 people attend. And it was like you were supposed to pay a yearly fee if you went more than once or twice. And then I think the yearly fee, I want to say, was somewhere like $20 or something. And then you had to pay admission each time you went, which I think was $3. But the idea was, like I said, that you would go and share information and do the stuff. They had these long, lunch tables set up, and people would bring their computers. And then, like any situation like that, you would kind of gravitate towards the people that were more like you. So for us, the people that I met were kids my age, people that weren't old enough to drive, 13, 14, 15, like that. And the adults were in the front. So the adults were obviously more interested in doing modifications, hardware modifications, sharing programming tips, things like that. But we, the kids in the back, were more interested in just copying games, because here you have these people, and we all have our Commodore set up, and we all have our disk drives, and we all have our software collection, And I do remember some of the adults kind of frowning on what we were doing, I don't know if they wanted us to, if it was because they wanted us to pay attention to what they were doing, or if it was the legality of copying discs. I don't know, but of course, what's funny is whenever a hot new game came out or whatever, they all wanted a copy too. So it wasn't, like they were being super moral or anything like that. But, I think we all had the understanding that we were doing something that we weren't supposed to be doing. And I could tell a million stories about Univision, but the point of Univision is that it gave me the idea to have my own Copyfest. Now, I'm not saying that I invented the Copyfest. I didn't come up with the idea, but I invented it in my world. In other words, I hadn't heard of other people that were doing this. I just came up with this idea, after attending Univision. And Univision was held in a conference room in a hotel. And the money that they charged went to pay for that room, So I got the idea that I could basically rent one of those convention rooms, or a conference room, and invite like 20 to 30 people and charge $5 a head. And basically we would circumvent the whole Univision thing. We didn't want to have the user meeting. We would just all bring our computers and copy software. And so that's what I set out to do. The first thing I did was I went through all the BBSs that I called locally, and I made a list of all the people that were uploading the newest and best software. Because, you wanted people of the same level, the same caliber of software. You didn't want to invite people that were just going to copy stuff. You wanted people that, that were going to have things that other people wanted. So I made this list, and I started inviting people and said, hey, would you be interested if I held a Copyfest or and that's the word I always used, Copyfest. I've heard people call it copy parties or disc parties or swap parties or whatever, but I called them Copyfest. So I sent out these messages to people and asked them if they would be interested in coming, and they said yes. So the problem, the logistical problem that you see coming here is that I was 13 years old and I had no way of actually renting a meeting room at a hotel. So there was this one guy, and I think his alias was the Wizard. Now, you know how it is. Maybe it wasn't. And it seems like when I think back that there were multiple people named the Wizard, but I'm pretty sure this guy's name was the Wizard. But anyway, he was a friend of mine. And so it almost sounds like a drug deal or something, like I'm cutting him in on the action, but I told this guy, I said, listen, I don't have a credit card, so if you'll rent, and we hadn't met in person. I didn't know this guy that well. I had just, he ran a BBS and I was uploading games to him, and so I told him about my idea, and I told him that I didn't have a credit card, so I said, if you'll rent this room up front, I will pay you back with with the money. And I don't remember how much the room was. I want to say it was like $50 or something. I mean, it was a lot when you're a kid, but I talked to my parents about it, and they said if I didn't come up with the money, they would loan me the money, So anyway, but for the most part, they had no idea that I was planning this or what we were actually going to be doing. I think they thought that, obviously my parents weren't dumb, but I think to people that weren't in on the planning, it just kind of looked like we were doing our own, version of Univision, just a computer group or a bunch of people getting together with our computers. So anyway, the Wizard rented the room for us, and everybody showed up. Like, everybody that I invited showed up, everybody paid their money, and I paid the Wizard back, and I remember the Wizard not having any idea really how old I was. I'm sure he thought I was older. So it was kind of funny that most of us there weren't able to drive, and then there's this one guy, in his 30s or maybe 40s. But he didn't care. He got software just like the rest of us, and so that's what we did. We all set up our computers and our drives, and we all brought our software, and we just kind of went from desk to desk, and we would look through people's disks, and when you saw something, you'd take it back to your machine, make a copy, and come back, and it was so much faster than transferring stuff over the modem. I mean, keep in mind, like I said, if you were 300 baud, and these people weren't, 300 baud at this point. There was definitely a line in the digital sand, so to speak. 300 baud people were the people that were posting text or kids that were modeming or whatever. But if you were trading software, you had to have 1200 baud. Nobody would put up with 300 baud at that point. Later, when 2400 baud became available, the same thing happened. The file traders were the first ones to adopt 2400 baud. Hey, there's the train I mentioned. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a train. Hotel Podcasting 101. Lessons learned for everybody. But anyway, so all these people showed up, and we're swapping discs. And I remember at one point I had gone down to the lobby. I think we were going to walk next door to get, or there was a snack machine or something. We had gone down, and the receptionist asked us what we were doing with our computers, and I said, well, I invited a bunch of people, and we're all trading software, just matter of factly like that. And she just nodded, and like that was the most normal thing she had ever had. So, back then piracy just did not have the social stigma that it has now, and especially not in our age group, kids. I think people knew that copying software was wrong per se, but like I said, it was nothing like it was today, So after that first Copyfest, and I don't remember exactly how many people came, but let's say 15 people came or something like that, 15, 20 people, something like that. Everybody left, and everybody went back to BBS's and posted about what a success it was and how cool it was, and what a great thing we had done. That obviously made me want to put on a second one. And so that's what we did, but it was a few months later. I remember the first one was in the fall, right before I had gone back to school, because two of the guys over there had these really sweet mullets, and just super long in the back, and I remember telling my mom, I was like, I really want to have a haircut like that, and I remember we having talks about how that their parents would probably make them cut it before they went back to school. So I remember it was right before school started, so this could have been the fall of 85, maybe the fall of 86, one or the other. And then I didn't have my second Copyfest until the spring, and I remember it was really cold. And one of the mullet guys, his name was Mark, and he was friends with my friend Justin, who went by Arcane. And there's a lot of stories about Arcane in Commodore, if you've read that. So Mark had gone back and told my friend Justin that I was kind of a dork, but that I had a lot of good software, So Mark was kind of this middleman that was involved in getting me and Justin together, which is funny because neither of us have any idea where Mark is today, and Justin and I are still good friends. I talked to Justin earlier today. So through training software on the Commodore in the mid-'80s, we're still friends almost 30 years later. But anyway, so the second Copyfest was at the same hotel. And like I said, it was really cold that day. And Justin and I were copying software. And I remember exactly how it played out, but Justin was asking if anybody would walk with him to go to McDonald's, which was a few blocks away. And he was asking Mark, and Mark said no, he didn't want to go to McDonald's or whatever. And so finally Justin said, okay, I'm going to McDonald's. And then Mark said, hey, while you're there, will you get me some chicken McNuggets? So he didn't want to go, but he wanted Justin to bring him food back. So I said, hey, I'll go with you, So Justin and I ended up leaving the Copyfest and walking to McDonald's. And so this is like our first time, I guess, like our first adventure together, the first time we really met and hung out. And on the way back from McDonald's, Justin dug Mark's Chicken McNuggets out of the sack, opened the box. And like I said, it was frigid cold. It was probably January, February, something like that in Oklahoma. So it was really cold and one of those really windy days where the wind's just blowing through you. And one by one, he would take Mark's Chicken McNuggets out of the box and just hold them up in the air, trying to get them as cold as possible, which we thought was hilarious. And so as we're walking these couple of blocks back to the hotel, one by one, we're pulling the McNuggets out and cooling them off. And then when we got back, we gave Mark the McNuggets, and I can't remember if he complained that they were cold or not, but we thought that was really funny. So that was really like the first bonding moment that Justin and I had. But just like the first Copyfest, the second one went off without a hitch. We brought people together. People traded software. No big issues. It went pretty well, but I remember that between the first time and the second time, the cost of the room had gone up. And so to do it a third time, I was either going to have to invite more people, which I was running out of people that were avid software collectors. Like I said, the Copyfests were only good if people were bringing software that other people didn't have. So I found a different hotel that I could get a room that was a little bit cheaper. And so our third Copyfest, I don't remember what hotel it was, but this would have been probably, it was in the summer. So it might have been later that summer, maybe the summer of 86, maybe as late as 87. It could have been 87 because in 87 I was 14, and I remember at one of these that Justin had his driver's license for a Honda scooter. In Oklahoma, you could get a motorcycle license when you're 14. I remember he had one, and his birthday was in February, and I didn't have mine yet, and my birthday was in August. So I would suspect it was the summer of 87. So we have moved from the Grand Continental Inn, which is where we'd had the first few Copyfests. I don't remember the name of the next hotel. But when we got there, this room was in a basement, and there were steps. There was like a staircase that led in from the side by the pool, and the pool had been closed. The pool was empty, and you went in this down a staircase and down to this room that smelled moldy, and like half the lights were burned, like they had fluorescent lights. It was like meeting in a dank basement, with carpet that smelled a little moldy. It was really terrible, and it definitely had a different feel than the first two, because the first two, like I said, you're in a conference room at a hotel. It's very nice, well lit, and then this was like a storage room that they had converted or something. And one of the memories I always have of this one was like I said, most of us weren't old enough to drive, so the first thing we would do is go out and see if there were vending machines, where we could get snacks or whatever, because to get the most for our money, we would hole up in these places for at least 4, 5, 6 hours, something like that. So we found this vending machine, and it was like filled with off-brand food. Like there was something, Yummy-O's or something like that was like Oreos. I don't remember what they all were, but the one that I'll never forget was there was a sack that looked like gummy bears or something, but they were bigger. And on the front of the bag it said chocolate-covered gummy rats. And I will never forget those, because Jeff, my friend Jeff, had come to this one as well. And Jeff bought a sack of chocolate-covered gummy rats, and they were every bit as disgusting as they sound. I mean, they were chocolate covered gummy rats. What part of that doesn't sound disgusting, but it was hilarious. But yeah, and it was so hot in this room that I remember, I'm copying discs, and you'd have a little bit of sweat bead rolling down your face, and I kept getting chocolate on my fingers from these chocolate-covered gummy rats that were just melting. So I have a very, very vivid memory of that Copyfest. But I think that was the last Copyfest that I held publicly in a hotel where we paid money to rent a place. Now, a few years later, maybe not a few years. I do remember I was old enough to drive. So this would have been, but I was in high school. So 89, I got my license in 89. So this could have been 1990, something like that. There was another local sys-op named Beach Boy. I couldn't even tell you why. I fought with this guy all the time, and for the life of me, I'm trying to remember why. I can't remember why. I think I just didn't like him, and he didn't like me, or something, And it was kid stuff, so we would squabble, we would fight, and then we would both have something the other one needed, so we would get along just long enough to do that, and then we would start fighting again. So anyway, Beach Boy decided he was going to have a Copyfest. And his dad owned a TV repair shop. So, and they weren't open on the weekends, I guess. And so his dad said that Beach Boy could have a Copyfest at the TV repair shop. And he invited me, which was ridiculous because we really couldn't stand each other, And I went because I was always tempted by the allure of software. I get to the point where I had so much software, and I talked about this at Commodore, and I've talked about it before. It was never about playing the games, and for me, it was never about that. Jeff, all my friends have given me jokingly a hard time about that. That for me, it was about the competition, the collecting, and the building of the library, the organizing, the categorizing, the cataloging, all those things I enjoyed. But very rarely did I play any of the games more than just a few minutes, But since I had so much software, some of these people I would trade with, it might be 10 to 1 or 20 to 1. I would give a lot of software if I could get one or two things in return. So that's, I think, what I had hoped for at Beach Boys Copyfest. So I'm at this Copyfest, and there are like 4 or 5 people here, and I would call them a bunch of Beach Boys lackeys, people that were kissing up to him for some reason, I don't know. And I don't remember getting very much software, but there was one hot game that had just came out called the Games Winter Edition. Now that's different than Winter Games, the part of the game series by Epix. This was called the Games Winter Edition. And it was a very difficult game to copy. I had a friend that had copied it for me, but I wasn't able to make copies of it. And so I got home, and within a few minutes, Justin called me on the phone. And Justin had not gone to this Copyfest. So Justin calls me, and he says, "Hey, do you have the Games Winter Edition?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I want you to make sure you have it. Go get your discs." And I said, "Well, I know I have it. I know what number it is." He says, "No, I want you to go get it." So I go, and I remember, it's funny how your memory works. I had numbered every disc. And the Games Winter Edition was on 2 floppies, and it was discs 179 and 180. Don't ask me why I still remember that. I always get my wife and my daughter's birthdays mixed up because they're 2 days apart, but somehow I remember the disc number of the Games Winter Edition from almost 30 years ago. So I pull out my disc box and I'm flipping through my discs, and it goes 175, 176, 177, 178, 181. And there are 2 discs that are missing. And so I say, well, that's interesting. And Justin says, yeah. He says, someone just called my board and sent someone else an email and said that they had stolen 2 discs from Jack Flack at a Copyfest. Now, back in the BBS days, everything that happened, there was only one person on a BBS at a time, back then anyway, and the sysop, if they were sitting at the computer, could see everything that the person was doing. So he had seen somebody emailing or sending a message to someone else stating that, and the person that had sent that had been at the Copyfest. So I don't think that the whole Copyfest was set up just to steal those 2 discs from me. I think it was I felt like it at the time, but looking back now, especially thinking about kids that are 15, 16, I think it was just a crime of opportunity, and I did eventually get my revenge, which could be a podcast for another day, but there were very few wrongs that went unrighted. So, but yeah, so that was, I think the last Copyfest that I attended that someone else had thrown. Now, there was one other Copyfest that I do remember very well, and it was thrown by, I'm going to get these guys' names wrong, but there was a BBS that my friend Klaatu kind of adopted, is probably the best word for it. His neighbors ran a BBS called the Enterprise, and it was dedicated to Star Trek, and all the members, or especially the staff members, changed their names, their aliases, to be affiliated with Star Trek, with the new Star Trek. So I don't remember what Klaatu, I don't know what he was, but I remember I was Chief O'Brien, and one of the guys was Captain Picard, and one of the guys was Riker, and so it was a whole Star Trek theme. But anyway, the kid that was running it eventually went off to college. No, I think he joined the military, maybe the Army or something. But anyway, he went on, moved away, and so Klaatu basically adopted all this guy's hardware, and he and I retooled. Well, Klaatu did all the work, but we reformed it, and it became known as the Wares Shop BBS. Wares obviously being slang for software or illegal software. So yeah, subtlety was never, it's like getting a personalized license plate that says, drug dealer. I mean, Wares Shop BBS, it is a BBS where we are going to be trading wares. So anyway, at one point, Klaatu and the guys that had run the Enterprise right before, before it was Wares Shop, they had a garage that had been converted into like a den, and they had these tables in there, and so we had a Copyfest in there. I don't remember how many people came. I just remember it was one of those. It was almost like there were so many tables in this room that it filled the room, and then you just had to like weasel around the perimeter, So once it was like sitting in a corner booth at a restaurant. I mean, once you got into a position, you couldn't get out, and so I just remember sitting in this room and sweating for hours as people are passing discs around and things like that, But I think that's really like the last BBS Copyfest that I remember going to. That would have been, 91. I graduated in 91, so that it could have even been after high school. But, like I said, again, some of this is things I've mentioned in Commodore, but I kind of got out of Commodore computers when I went to college. I went to college for 3 years, and we had Macs in our computer lab there, so I started doing layout, and it was like this 3-year period where the Commodore slowly faded out of my life, and then by the time that I was done with school, everybody had an IBM clone. It was like this 3-year, little thing. So, and then with I got my PC clone 94, and I think when I got it, it came with a 9600 baud modem. But I don't think I had that for long. I mean, it wasn't long before I had 14.4 and 28.8 came soon after that, and it wasn't a year or two before 56K. But even at 14.4, even at 9600, really, but at 14.4, technology had solved the problem that we were circumventing with Copyfests, and that was the speed factor. Now software had grown in size as well. Think about Commodore games filling up, a 180K floppy, and a lot of the games we traded didn't even take up a full disk. I mean, if the cartridge dumps or whatever were 32K games, so sending 32K over the modem was a lot smaller than in the PC days when discs started taking, you're talking, if they were 3.5 disc images, it's 1.4 meg, and if a game took up 1, 2, 3, 4 floppies, so it was bigger in size, but 14.4, 28.8, it just started flying, and so it began to be faster once again to trade software over the phone than it was to do it in person. And that was the whole reason why we started my circle, why we started Copyfests. Like I said, once you could call BBSs and there was new software and it was faster to get it over the phone, then we kind of went back to doing that. I wouldn't. It's not really a Copyfest, but the last one that I would say is close. It was really kind of back to the one-on-one type trading. I think there were 2 or 3 of us, but for a very short time, when I first got my PC, I had met a couple of guys that I was working with at Pizza Hut, and I would take my computer over to their house after work, and we would use a lap link cable, which was a serial cable. Serial or parallel cable? It was parallel. Parallel cable that would transfer data at a mind-numbingly slow pace. It was faster than copying the discs, but it doesn't seem like it was much faster. So we would copy software, and I spent a lot of nights taking my machine over there and building up a collection that way. But yeah, it really, like I said, it got to the point where when it was faster to do it and not leave your house, obviously that was preferable, and that's kind of what happened to Copyfest. That's why we don't have them today, other than they're massively, illegal, and now it would probably get you thrown in jail. But yeah, then nobody wants to sit around and burn CDs and do that stuff. You just send it over your cable modem or whatever, and yeah. So once again, it was a little slice of old school history that got replaced by technology. And do I miss them? Yes, I miss them in the way that I miss BBSs and that I miss a lot of these topics that I talk about on You Don't Know Flack. I miss them in the way that I like the getting together of the people. I like the party type atmosphere. I like the face-to-face meeting. But like BBSs, like a lot of those things, would I want to go back to doing it? Not really. If I need MP3s or a program or something like that, I go to Google, you find it, you download it. Back then it was faster. It was more efficient, let's say, to drive to someone's house if you were going to copy 5 or 6 games than it would be to transfer it over the phone line. Now, if you compared bytes to bytes, which isn't fair, but I could download, those games of those same size faster than I could put my shoes on, so, it was just really, just something that went away, and no need for them anymore, but they were good times. I did enjoy doing them. So, but anyway, that pretty much wraps up my history of Copyfests, and this wraps up You Don't Know Flack, episode 117. This also wraps up my first podcast recorded in a hotel room, and my first podcast recorded on the iPad. And I'm wondering right now, my face is 3 feet away from a hotel wall, and I'm wondering if the people next to me in room 825 are wondering what the hell I'm talking about over here. Maybe they just learned all about Copyfests. So I think that's it. So I will send this file to the home server. I'm going to do very minimal editing on this one, get it online, and then we'll be ready for 118. So that wraps up 117. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, feedback, if you have ideas for future shows, send those to me. You can email me at Rob O'Hara, that's ROBOHARA, Rob O'Hara at robohara.com. Send me your feedback, send me requests for future shows, any of that stuff. I love to hear it. That's really what keeps me writing, what keeps me recording, all that stuff. And basically, I live for your feedback and your money. So you can PayPal me for this show. Not really. I do it for free. I do it for the love. But seriously, though, send me your email. I'd love to hear from you all. And I think that about wraps it up. So until next month, this is me from the hotel in Washington, D.C. signing off. I'll see you next month.